nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik. I will be your host for today's Nonprofit MBA podcast, as I have been for the past 6 years. I think this is like our 300th or so episode. I am co-founder of Financing Solutions. For those of you who don't know about Financing Solutions, we are the leading provider in the United States of lines of credit for nonprofits. And you may or may not know, it's extremely hard for a nonprofit to get approved for a line of credit from a commercial bank or a local bank. There's many reasons why. And that's what we've been doing for 14 years, is providing lines of credit to small nonprofits. It's a great product. It's very popular. There's thousands of organizations like yours that are listening to this that have a line of credit. So if you're interested in learning more, please visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And today I am very excited to be speaking with Julie Ordonez from Courage Lab. Julie is a major gift strategist and coach on a mission to equip leaders with the courage to ask for more and raise multi-billions to solve the world's most pressing issues. With 14 years of experience in major gifts, Julie was top 1% performer at the United Way of Greater Los Angeles among 90 full-time employees, and at Lyft, as well as New Story Raise, where she rose $2.5 million in her first 12 months in 2022. She has coached and trained over 200 nonprofit executives and major gifts teams since 2018. And Julie, of course, is the founder of Courage Lab, and they have a 6-week major gift training program for leaders such as yourselves. So Julie, welcome to today's Nonprofit MBA podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Stephen.
So today we're going to be talking about building a process to raise major gifts for nonprofits. Now, I think, Julie, would you agree that, you really what you want to do is build a process first, so that way it's kind of set in stone and it's something that can be repeatable. Is that correct? Is that the way you think of this too?
It's a great question. I think having a process that works for your nonprofit, your team's strengths, the kind of fundraising model that you want to have that works for the mission, for your goals, is important. I don't like the phrase set in stone because the world is changing so fast. So I think of myself as more like, let's try it out. Let's experiment. Let's consider ourselves scientists, and it's okay to test something out and see how it works for 3 months, 6 months, and reevaluate and shift. And then there are things that are best practices. There are things within raising major gifts that are evergreen, right? Meeting with people in person, there's never going to be a substitute for that. It's just, that is the ideal scenario for raising 5K, 10K plus gifts from individuals. Now, it may not be the strategy, the process that your donors want right now. It just depends on who your community is. It depends on how you want to raise money and what makes sense for your goals and your team.
I went to a fundraiser for this nonprofit that I'm involved with. It was a golf outing. I've been involved with a lot of nonprofits outside of work, and it seems to me what nonprofits first, they start off with trying to get grants. That when they're newer, right? They start off with trying to get grants, and then they start off with I'm not sure if it's a subscription-based donation model, but maybe that's next. And then the next thing is they look at fundraising events like golfing or auctioning or
A gala.
that. And then the fourth step that they look at is major gifts. And I'm an outsider. Is that fair to say that goes in that four-step process, so to speak?
I mean, I think that if you're a brand new founder and you're starting an organization from scratch, everybody starts with asking people who they know to give something. There's no way around that.
Yep.
And depending on who you are, you may be a part of a network and a community that can give or not. And so if you're not a part of a network that is high net worth individuals or people who have any discretionary income, then you're going to have to go after grants. You're going to have to rely on institutional funding to get you where you need to go. And there are so many institutional funders that want to start something that's innovative, right? They want to they want to be the seed funder, and some of them don't. Some of them are like, go out there, get to the $1 million a year mark, then come back to us and let us know, oh, this is a safe bet. You have other funders who are funding you, and you're not solely reliant upon us or too reliant upon us. So, and I also think it depends on the mission. If you are a local-based, community-based organization, then that's going to change the fundraising model, right? You might have, if let's say if you're in Atlanta, you might naturally have a bigger corporate strategy as a result of having these big corporations in your backyard, like UPS comes to mind, right? And UPS is a huge philanthropic corporate social responsibility value for giving back to the community. So if you were there, right, it would make sense. So yeah, I think it depends on the organization. Some nonprofits don't really need to focus on many grants at all because they're in an area where there are a lot of wealthy people who live there. And if you are, let's say, I have a client who is an art center and a museum, and they have a lot of really wealthy patrons. And so they don't really need to apply for any grants.
Wow.
So it just depends on the organization. It depends on what makes sense based on your work, your mission, your community, the founder, right? The founder's strengths, the founder's network, the founder's willingness to go for it or play it safe.
Yeah, I went in that order that I use because it seems that, I'm talking about, when I talk about major gifts, so we're talking about like $100,000, $1 million, bigger gifts, right? And I kind of came up with those steps because I see that, people are reluctant to go to a major donor asking for a lot of money when they don't have a track record and they also don't have their verbiage down. And they also haven't had a process where they're doing consistent calls or, getting out and taking people to lunch or whatever, and also often the executive director for a smaller organization doesn't have the time to do the type of fundraising that's from major donors that is required. So the reason why I asked you the question about those steps, and regardless if they're one replaces the other or whatever, I wanted to ask you: do you think major donors? I have an answer. I have a hint what you're going to say, but but do you think that major donors, that the effort to get major donors should come earlier in the process than fundraising, grants, small donations?
Abso-freaking-lutely.
And why?
If you have so I'm gonna have to pull up the stat. But there's research shown that most major donors, their first gift is usually small, like $100, $200,
Hmm.
could be $50, could be $1,000. That it's significantly smaller portion of what their capacity is and what their willingness is to actually give. So I think part of it is like a lack of know-how that is the case. Like most nonprofit founders who are in that spot of like, let's say they're below $1 million annual revenue, and this is certainly applies to people above that, they think, oh, we don't have any major donors because they have maybe one or two funders who are giving 20K, 50K, and everybody else is giving below 5,000 a year. And part of it is like, no, those people are your major donors. They're just not giving that major gift yet. And so to your point, build relationships with people. Pick up the phone. Don't overthink it. Call them, thank them, and ask them, hey, Stephen, why did you decide to give? You totally didn't have to do that, right? You don't have to be a board member. You don't have to donate your time. You don't have to give your hard-earned money. You could invest it, you could save it, you could give it to your kids, you could do any number of things with it. Why did you decide to donate to us? So think of it like, yes, relationship building, but almost market research. Like, let me find out who these people are, what makes them tick, and be genuinely curious. And then you can start to build this, oh, these are the kinds of people who are drawn to our work, who are mission aligned, who are values aligned, who think like we do, who, quote, get it, right? They just get it. And I think that's, if you were thinking about, I want to start a major donor process where I'm making strategic asks at the right time, I'm asking for the right amount, and I'm stewarding relationships really well, that's a good place to start. Pick up the phone and talk to the people who already gave you money, even if it's 25 bucks. And I think it feels, oh, we don't have time to do that, because it feels like it's energetically a huge lift. Making a phone call is usually like less than 10 minutes of your time. It's not going to go on forever. It's not actually a time suck. It really isn't. It's an energy thing. It's about, can I muster the energy to make a 5-minute call to a stranger I don't know? I might feel awkward. I might stutter. I might not know exactly what to say. They might be perturbed, maybe. These are all the things that are going, I don't want to look like a fool. I don't want to mess this up. We're not impressive enough. We need to have our impact data be at this threshold before I can actually ask for more, or before I can actually cultivate these relationships. All of these things people think in their mind, and that's exactly what holds them back from being fully funded.
When you're teaching your course or when you're coaching with your clients, what is their reluctance about calling major donors? Like doing what you just said. Forget if it's major donors, but if they're calling people, what's the reluctance?
What do I say? I have no idea what to say. Part of it is like, okay, what's the purpose of this? Like, people don't know what the purpose of the conversation is. It's like, that's the first thing I say. Have a clear objective for yourself and communicate that to the donor. Hey, Stephen, I'm calling you to say thank you. That's it. I'm not asking for anything. And I just really want to learn why you gave. If I tell you that up front, you probably have time for that. So there's a lack of just being clear, right? And a lot of us nonprofit folk are long-winded. We're so verbose. We're some people are, subject matter experts on what exactly they do in the community, or they come from academia and they use really fancy words. And it's like, that isn't going to, it's not how you build relationships. Is that how you build relationships? You go to people and you're like, well, Stephen, let me tell you all about me. And let me just go on and on and on. No. like, and I've even had, when I was an in-house fundraiser, I've had people on the program side go with me on donor meetings, donor trips, whatever it is. And they'll come back to the office and they'll be like, Julie, like, didn't even really talk about our work. Like, she didn't tell the donor this, and this. She didn't really. And I'm like, okay, that's not really how this gets done. I just go on and on about, our mission. And and that's what I think is the perception, right? And the bad advice that's given is, well, if people understood how good we are at what we do, and if they had all the information we had, and if they talk like we talk, and if they use the language that we use, and if they really get it, if they have a freaking PhD in what we do, then they'll give more money. Not true. Right? It's like, we're deeply uncomfortable with how ignorant our donors can be and the amount of money they're willing to fork over. Right? It's like, they actually need far less than we think. They need to know that we're trustworthy. They need to know that we keep our promise. And we need to communicate. Like with any relationship, you need to listen and you need to disclose things, right? You need to actually, it needs to be mutual. It needs to go both ways. And there are 10,000 ways to do that. And a super effective way is picking up the phone. And I think people are reticent to do that because there is a lot of bad advice on how to build relationships with people. There's a lack of know-how. There's so many people that I get that reach out to me that are like, I'm in this job. I need to raise $1 million in 12 months. I have no training. I don't know what I'm doing. Please help. What do I do? I have this portfolio of donors. I don't, and I, and I'm like, well, I mean, you can't just figure it out on YouTube University. I mean, that's not going to cut it, right? The stakes are too high. So, and in many ways, people know that. They know, I can't mess this up, so I'm not going to do anything, right? I'm going to get stuck in the mire of the perception of being productive. So I'm going to do all this event stuff, and I'm going to do all of this, all of these tasks that don't actually raise money. So it's two things, right? It's like, we don't have the technical skill of major gifts and fundraising. And we're afraid. We're like, I could learn as I go, but I'm not willing to do that. So I don't actually prioritize the things that are going to raise money because I'm not willing to fail as I go. I'm not, and I don't perceive my donors to be forgiving if I do mess it up.
What's the my concern would be too about the constant phone tag, the exec directors, or the fundraisers, they're doing a lot of things, right? So you make this call, you go to someone's voicemail, you leave a message, they call you back, you didn't pick up the phone, you call them back, it goes back and forth. What is there an easier way? Like, for example, I use You Can Book Me, right? YouCanBookMe.com, which is, allows people to book right on my calendar. How would you work this all in to make the process streamlined and faster?
The key to my success and my clients' success has been that we're relentless. So the big secret is following up a lot.
So it's
And
just part of the job is going to be you're going to go back and forth with people until you get them hold of them live.
yes.
Yeah.
And I think a way to optimize it so that you have a greater success and you cut down on the going back and forth is by elevating your communication skills, both in writing and, on the phone, leaving a voicemail, whatever it is. And again, most nonprofit leaders are really wordy and long-winded, and they beat around the bush. So when I'm working with executives, I often ask, okay, what is it that you want out of this email? Do you want them to donate? Do you want a meeting? Do you want them to respond with answering a question? It can't be all three. It's too much. You're overcooking the grits. Like, get to the point, right? And it's like, I always tell people, I'm like, cut your email in half and then cut it in half again. Arrive at the point and you will raise more money. So part of it is, again, that technical skill of elevating your communication so that you're clear, you're concise, and you're going to be more likely to get a response if they understand why you're asking for a meeting, if they understand that you don't need an hour of their time. All right, there's a lot of things that I think are barriers that we don't realize we create in our donor communications.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this nonprofit I got involved with about 4 months ago as in my personal life. And they help these men who have the addiction. They go into it's a mission, and they go into a 1 year program completely where they have to stay there for 1 year. They're not allowed to use a cell phone and so on and so forth. So I went there and I was serving the men lunch. I volunteered to serve the men lunch. And the the director of fundraising came off to me and, said thank you. And she did all the right things, right? She did all the right things. She came up, she thanked me. She asked me why I was there, what was my motivation, right? I was like, oh, this is good because I see it not happen very often. And and then that was a year ago. No, wait, 6 months ago. And nothing's happened since then. Right. I'm not saying I haven't, have I gotten emails or like, I certainly have a good net worth. So she could come back at me. Right. And she could, and say, hey, it's been 6 months since we talked. You talked about why you were doing this. And I just wanted to see, what do you think of the program so far? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's only been 6 months. So maybe she hasn't gotten around to it yet. Right. But, there's not a lot of men who are going to go there, what I mean by that. I mean, there are not a lot of men who are volunteering, right? It's mostly, women because it's during the day. And so, I don't know. So, so if from a business standpoint, to me, it's about consistent execution and of staying in touch, doing your research, making sure the people you're talking to have the ability to donate bigger money, and being consistent with it. And like you said, having the right, saying the right things and just checking in. What do you think?
Part of what I work with my clients on is being able to read the signs. So oftentimes, I think your own experience, it's like happens a lot. So it's almost like if you think about like high school, where there's like this beautiful girl, but she doesn't know that she's beautiful. And, there's not a lot of those, but, there was probably one. And then there were usually like maybe some guys who were really into her, but she has no idea. And she just thinks, oh, they're just nice, or that's just how they are. They're just, and so many of my clients are that unassuming, beautiful high school girl. There are clients who are donors, excuse me, who are like head over heels for the organization in terms of they're all in, like in their heart is with this nonprofit. Right. And my client, the nonprofit executive, completely underestimates how some of their donors feel about them and what they would be willing to do if they asked. And so I help them to develop their wisdom, their discernment, and like their spidey senses is what I call it, so that they can better interpret donor behavior and the signs. So you pointed out some really great things. You said, I'm volunteering during the day. Already, right? That's a signal that there's something about you. You're not working 9 to 5. You have some agency over your time. You're not beholden to a certain timeline, right? And that could be an indicator of wealth. The other is you're volunteering your time, right? And the psychology of a wealthy person, time's much more valuable than even money, right? Like money is going to come and go, money can be made. Time, we don't get that back. So this is something else that a lot of nonprofit leaders, it's part of their mentality and their mindset that they have a ton of time, so they usually take volunteers for granted sometime.
Well, just keep in mind, there's more to it. I'm a monthly donator, and it's pretty big, and I bought a golfing package to go to their fundraiser. So that's
so
another
your current
donation.
donor is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And so these aren't small things. Even I know the size of this nonprofit, it's like $4 million. So it's
So they're probably assuming that, there's probably two things happening: that you are giving your best gift, and or that if they are planning to ask you for more, that it's just not the right time.
It could be. Yeah.
That they want to do it at some point in the future. And so that's the other piece, right? Is like reading the timing. Like if someone comes and volunteers their time, then that is a really emotional moment, right? There's like a deeper sense of ownership that Stephen has over this mission. You had an emotional. So I think what I would have adjusted to the process is I would have called you after and gotten your feedback and said, hey, what was your experience like that day serving lunch? How would what did you see? What did you notice? How can we improve the volunteer experience?
Yeah, she did do that. Anyway, I don't want to belabor it. So I'm using this as a case example, and I have I have the opposite case example too. So, and that is, I got involved with this organization. It's a grief organization, and I raised $15,000 for them. Right. So
Nice.
that is outside of my donation.
Yeah, that's great.
Right. So they had this big fundraiser. Wow, was it organized well? I mean, I think they raised $300,000.
Nice.
I mean, it was really well run, right? They had an auctioneer, just top of the line ballroom, just really, really nice, right? A lot of people. And so they asked for a committee of people who are volunteers to come onto the fundraising committee, right? And so I went on there with 5 other people. And, I raised by far the most money, right? $15,000. Never got a thank you. Never got anybody coming up to me saying, wow, that's great. Right. Um, you know, and then, I mean, I donated $15,000 myself. I matched it. Right.
Mhm.
And so, and then the guy who's running the fundraising thing, the event, who I was interacting with, gets promoted to the director of fundraising,
Mhm.
and still nothing over a 3-year period of time. So, I'm just observing this, and I do so many of these podcasts
Mhm.
that one of the podcasts, that theme comes up often, that people are not being thanked enough,
Yeah. Donor
right? And
churn for
and I,
most organizations is really high.
yeah, and I see this. I see these things going on that my guests, like you, Julie, are telling me, right? And to me, it's I when it came to the mission with the addiction, that nonprofit, um, I honestly think that they've been around for 108 years,
Wow.
right? They have. I don't. I actually, to be honest with you, I think that fundraising person is not hungry enough to really raise enough money. Like it's like their process is so down that they're coasting
Yeah.
because and so I don't think there's a hunger there, right? They have the $4 million that comes in. That's what they need. That was
Mhm.
my impression. It's very well organized and stuff like that. So she really doesn't need to go after people. It's kind of coming to her.
Yeah.
And then the other organization, the grief organization, which is an $8 million organization,
Uh-huh.
they're inept. When it came to, yeah, I hate to say it, they got, they just seemed like they were inept. I mean, so I don't know. I don't know what to say. So I'm kind of a businessman, so I kind of look at this
Yeah.
from and so I mean, anyway.
Yeah, and I think a few things are at play. Part of it is, I mean, this is why I have a company called Courage Lab. I mean, the root of courage is humility. And the very first thing that the mindset that I try to get inside of my clients is it's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about there are two heroes in this story. There's the hero of the community member who is a program participant and their story from A to Z and how they are the hero of their own story. And then there's the hero that is the donor. And that's a bit more complex than your typical business, right? Where the hero is the customer. There's one hero, it's the customer.
Yep.
And so in the nonprofit world, right, you have to balance those two messages. And it's complex to do. It can be done and people do it, right? And so but part of that piece of character development and being a well-led leader, leading yourself well, is recognizing it isn't about us. We are not entitled to a dime, even if we've been around for 108 years. Doing good work is not enough, right? And there's so many businesses that sell great products and it isn't enough. Like they need to master marketing, they need to manage their finances well, they need to be great leaders, right? And managers. There's so many components to that. And but what I really focus on is both the technical skill of becoming a real major gifts powerhouse fundraiser and becoming a really courageous leader who you're willing to put your ego aside. You're willing to do whatever it takes and you're willing to adapt and change. If something worked 3 years ago, it may not work now, right? And so what do we need to let go of and stop doing? And that's a really important question to ask if we really want to grow revenue.
Yeah, I think the way I've run my businesses has been based on great execution. And that's what really gets me excited when I see a well-run organization. And I like what you just said now is a well-run organization is someone who does less, but does it really, really well. And if you're going to go where the money is, I think getting big donors, major gifts, it's got to be a part of your strategy. Even if you're only going after 2% of your donors, it's got to be part of your strategy and it's got to be consistent. And, when I started my career, I worked for Xerox, which most people don't know who Xerox is, but they were the Google of its day. This is, 35 years ago. And the CEO of Xerox, he would travel once a month with his salespeople out in the field so that he can go see clients. And he had to get 5 appointments that day when the CEO traveled with you. And, it's because he needed to stay in touch with the client, right? So I think major gifts should be an important part of the process because the return is so beneficial for your organization. Even if you're just making a couple calls a week, I think it's just got to be done. And I'm sure, Julie, you would agree with that too.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Tell me about your training program that you do, and then we're going to wrap this up. But tell me a little bit about the training program that you do.
So Courage Lab is a great place to start for folks who need to raise their first 10K, 20K gift from an individual. Or if you've been doing it for a while, but you feel like you're just kind of making it up as you go and you don't want to do that anymore. So it's 6 weeks and I'm your mentor and your guide. And you learn, how to make the ask, how to build relationships, how to create a strategic plan that works for you and your organization. I'm really all about having a strengths-based approach. So instead of trying to do something that you deeply suck at, let's just let go of that, and focus on the stuff that you're pretty good at. Maybe it is a natural talent and it's going to help you raise money and build relationships with the right people. And it needs to become your genius. You need to sharpen that. So that's really what we focus on. Engaging board members in fundraising is another topic that we go through. And the next cohort is in September 2024. If people are interested in learning more about that, they can go to nonprofitcouragelab.com. And it's really beautiful to see nonprofit executive directors, development officers go through that program and have that light bulb moment of like, wow, I can do this. Actually, I can raise $10,000 from one individual. It is possible for me. And, I've had people go through it who are in tiny little rural towns and have success, or they're in major markets. They've been fundraising for 20 plus years and they never really got formal training in major gifts. And it's a great place for them to go. And I love it. It's an honor to do it.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Julie, thanks so much for coming on. I'd like to thank Julie Ordonez from Courage Lab for coming on today's podcast. And if you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend. The Nonprofit MBA podcast is in the top 1% of listened to podcasts in the nonprofit space. So, I'm really, really glad. And, people like Julie is the main reason why it's so popular. So also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app so you get notified when really great when really great guests come on. And if you also like today's podcast, please give us a 5-star review on your podcasting app to get the word out. And of course, if you're looking for a line of credit for your nonprofit or you want to learn more about it, please feel free to visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Julie, I know we mentioned it already, but if people want to get in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Find me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. It's like my favorite place. Your donors are on LinkedIn, so you should be on there. And yeah, Julie Ordonez on LinkedIn. Connect with me, follow me, say hi.
Yep. And also couragelab.com, is it? Or no, it's
Nonprofitcouragelab.com.
nonprofitcouragelab.com. Okay,
That's right.
great. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
So I want to thank all our listeners, not so much for listening today. I do thank you for that, but I also want to thank you for trying to make the world a better place. There are a lot of issues and problems going on in the world, and you guys are out there on the front line trying to make a difference. And I know you are. I know Julie and I both try to do it in our own way, but you're out there every single day. And I just want to remind you that you're no good to your family, your friends, your employees, your cause if you don't think about yourself first. Because I know you're all out there, you're very generous with your time and unselfish. And this is saving the world is a marathon and not a sprint. So you have to be careful with your energy and taking care of yourself, whether it's exercising, dieting, praying, meditation, taking time to go for whatever it is. Make sure you're doing those things because that'll make a big difference in the long run. Other than that, I just wish everybody a great day and thank you for listening to the Nonprofit MBA podcast.